Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to After the Buzzer. I am your host, Couper Moorhead, and we are talking about the Miami Heat's 110-108 loss to the Memphis Grizzlies, which ended the Heat's 6-game winning streak that had followed the 10-game losing streak. They still played really well tonight. This is one of those games where, much like the games during that losing streak, we said this often, they played more than well enough to win. They even played well in the fourth quarter, hit some big shots. The Grizzlies were just hungry. They were playing for something on their side of the bracket in the Western Conference. They were ready to match the Heat shot for shot, play for play. They matched them with energy, matched them with desire, matched them almost evenly in every category on the floor, and came up with the game winner from Ja Morant at the end. Miami continued to shoot extraordinarily well. They were 42% from three tonight. Memphis was also 42%. I just want to note quickly, this is what the Heat's last week plus of shooting. These are their three-point percentages with one game against Washington where they were at 28. But here are their last stretch of games. 42%, 46%, 28%, 46, 54, 68, 41, 41. That is as good of a stretch of three-point shooting as you will ever see in the history of the league. And I'm not exaggerating there. Before that Washington game, they had been on a stretch that was equivalent to some stuff that the Golden State Warriors, the 2015-16 Warriors, did when they set the all-time regular season wins record. That's how good the Heat were shooting. They were shooting Steph Curry, Klay Thompson Warriors good. None of that matters right now, and I want to bring it back to something about Memphis. During that losing streak, Eric Spoelstra had been positive. He kept saying that they're playing well, they're coming together as a team, there's a positivity building, they're trending upwards, even as the results aren't coming through kind of the way they wanted to, with a couple exceptions. And one of those exceptions was the Memphis game in Memphis, where the Heat just didn't have it. They were not, they weren't all there. They weren't playing up to their own standards in pretty much every facet of the game. Ja Morant didn't play in that one. They got beat soundly. They gave up a season-high 72 in the paint, which was, again, we talk about the Heat's defense working as intended. 72 in the paint is not as intended. That was not a good game for the Heat's defense. Tonight, in the first half, or the first quarter, the Grizzlies had just 12 points in the paint. And that was in the first half. The second half, they had 32 in the paint. And we will talk about why that is right now. And it basically comes down to Ja Morant. I think Ja's story tonight is actually kind of interesting. There's some history here where Ja hadn't played against the Heat since 2021. There had been some suspensions. There had been injuries. He just hadn't played the Heat. Obviously, Memphis and Miami only play twice a year, so it's a little easier to miss those games. But when I'm watching Ja early in this game, it was interesting. He had a really slow start, and it looked like someone who hadn't played Miami in a while. And what I mean by that is that as a guy who gets downhill, like that is his game. He's one of the best downhill attackers, unbelievably athletic, really creative with the way he moves his body around space. That's his game, and the Heat, their entire defense is built around taking away that sort of thing, of taking away the drives, shrinking in defenders into driving lanes so you can't do that. And Ja early tonight looked like a guy who hadn't seen a scheme quite that aggressive in the way it pinched in the way it shrunk, in the way everybody was stabbing at the ball when he tried to get downhill. So he was not really navigating space really well. The Heat's defensive spacing was great. Morant was kind of trying to brute force it a few times, trying to get through tight spaces rather than finding better ways to attack. And he was only 1 of 7 in the first half with 3 turnovers, and he had just 3 points at halftime. So the Heat were doing an exceptional job on Morant. Morant there was an adjustment period. He just looked like a team that had not played a Heat-style defense in a while. And then halftime happened, and he made his adjustments. And that's what great players do. That's what players with a lot of talent do. And he had 27 on 15 shots in the second half alone. He was the only Grizzly with double-digit points in the second half. Morant finished the game, and this is the crucial part, 8 of 14 in the paint after making 0 shots in the paint in the first half. So 0 shots in the paint in the first half, makes 8 in the second half. And what was impressive about his adjustments was that Again, it wasn't brute force, trying to just get through the narrows of spaces. He did that a couple times. Spo mentioned one time where he split a pick and roll, and the window was that big for Morant to get through, and he just kind of turned his body, got through there, got in. But otherwise, he was kind of picking different angles. He was being cognizant of where Miami's help was coming from and where the help couldn't come from, especially attacking more from deeper in towards the corners where it's tougher for help to come from the baseline. He found matchups he liked a little bit more, and he was just patient and exploiting the areas where he thought he could do it rather than letting the Heat's defensive spacing dictate his game for him. Tyler Hero said post-game, he thought that they could have brought in more of the Heat's traditional shrinks and stabs are the words he used, the terminology he used, which is definitely correct. But again, Ja did really well making it tough for the Heat to do that by not attacking when he had three guys, already in his field of vision. The reason we're talking about all this is because it plays directly into the last play of the game winner. I want you to watch this while I'm talking, and you'll see here that Ja gets the switch with Kel'el Ware. It's actually interesting before that Memphis opted not to advance the ball on their timeout after the game got tied up. They wanted Ja kind of going full court and not having to inbound from the side. So Ja came up full court, still kind of managed the clock, got the switch with Kel'el. The switch is not the problem here. The Heat will give up that switch. Most teams are going to give up a switch in late-game situations like that. You want to keep the offense flat. You do not want to give up any kind of space at all. The issue here, and what Spoelstra said after the game was, it's okay, we were okay with the matchup, okay with Ware there, but you don't want to leave him on an island with Morant. Never on an island. And what he means by that is give up the switch, but don't leave him by himself. You still have to play your scheme. You still have to bring in guys. You still have to pinch in. You can't let Ware be out there 30 feet from the rim on Ja Morant by himself. And the Heat didn't exactly leave him by himself, but what's really interesting is that look at the setup of the play again. Ja's sizing up Ware. He's got Pelle Larsson on his right. He knows Pelle's ready to come in. Davion Mitchell is on his left. Memphis is kind of setting up. It looked like a bit of a potential hammer screen there. So, if the spacing was wrong, Ja would have an outlet to a corner guy with a screen in front of him. So Davion's pulled a little bit lower instead of being up at the elbow because of the way Memphis has the floor spaced. And as Ja makes his move from the left, Davion comes over to help. That's stabbing in, pinching in, shrinking in, whatever you want to call it. And watch what Ja does with his dribble. He kind of pulls his dribble back and hangs it there. And that Tyler's really good at doing this too, by the way. But he kind of pulls that dribble back, and as he's hanging it there, so Davion can't get to the ball, and now there's a shooter in the corner there. So if Davion commits and makes Ja pick his dribble up fully, Ja might be able to swing it to the corner. But it's just very few guys can do it as fluidly as Ja does it there. He hangs that dribble. Davion comes over, can't get it. He has to pull back to make sure he can cover a little bit of the shooters. Maybe he could have stayed there and forced Ja to give up the ball because of the time that was left. That's one of those bang-bang plays. But then Ja gets the space back after he made the space with the dribble, gave himself a half second, which is all he needed. Then he put the shoulder and the forearm into Kel'el, backed up with the space he made, hit a jumper, bounced off the rim just enough times to make the time expire, and that was that. So I don't think, nothing. The switch isn't the problem. Ware did fine with it. He stayed in front. He got beat by a tough shot, got beat by a great player making great play, just as with the Cade Cunningham shot a couple weeks ago. If you're in a situation like that, that is just going to happen to you sometimes over the years. You're going to get beat by a great player. You just want to avoid being in that spot to begin with. Now, part of why they were in that spot, part of why they were still in the game, because the Grizzlies were surging behind Morant in the second half. The reason that he kept playing catch-up and were constantly there, they were constantly nibbling at the lead and getting back in front, then it would go back and forth. But it was Bam and Tyler. Second out of a back-to-back, you're in Boston. That's a long flight. You get in late. These are the games where you need your leaders to pull from the front. Everybody get behind us. We're going to pull you forward. And that's what they did. Bam, for his part, Bam has this dueling banjos thing going on with Jaren Jackson Jr., and I asked him about it after the game. What is it about that matchup that you guys Those two have no fear of one another. They go at and attack each other no matter what. Every time they play, there's a little bit of, mano-a-mano stuff going on there. Bam downplayed it, but, we see how these guys play each other. There's clearly a competitive edge, a competitive fire, some sort of, competition just between those guys, the game within the game. Last time in Memphis, Jaren had a great game. Tonight, Bam kind of won the battle while losing the war in the game. Bam had 26 on 26 shots, high volume for him, and 49 shots between Bam and Tyler. That lets you know when those two combine for 49 shots, that's the game where they know they need to be aggressive. The team needs them to be pulling them forward. So that matchup is always fun to watch. I think it's a quiet rivalry. It doesn't get played up a lot, but when it's Heat Grizzlies, Bam and Jaren Jackson Jr. are going to be going at each other. So keep an eye out for that one in the future. Tyler also had a great game. He had 35 points and 23 shots. Got some threes. The best way for him to get threes lately is in transition, to be pushing. The Heat actually managed their pace. They pushed the pace pretty well, even through in the late stages of the game. But again, as we've seen for the past 6 to 8 weeks, Memphis is pushing up, pressuring Tyler. They don't want him to get any clean threes off. If he's going to take a three, they want him to really, really have to earn it to take a tough one. So they're pushing him up, and again, we've said this over and over, Tyler has done so well of taking the pressure, finding the angles, keeping his handle alive, finding his way downhill, and he's finishing these floaters, these mid-range shots at an unbelievably efficient rate. Tyler's three-point percentages have dropped a bit, over the past 2 months. He had a better shooting night tonight, but what's been impressive is that he's been wildly efficient. He's been finishing incredibly well at the rim, finishing great in the upper paint, floaters, runners. He's been finishing great on his pull-up twos when he does have to take those. So I think Tyler just deserves a lot of credit. He has adjusted to the adjustment, to the adjustment, to the adjustment, right? And he just keeps finding ways to have good games. It's really encouraging for what he's going to look like if and when the Heat earn their way into a playoff series, how Tyler manages playoff-style defense. These are the kind of games you look at and say he has seen all the coverages and he's found ways to find success against all these different coverages that are applying pressure, throwing multiple bodies at him. So good on him. And again, look, he played really well. They lost. It'll happen. They're still alive in the standings. They can still get up to 7 and 8. Tonight didn't necessarily help. The Milwaukee Bucks won, which locked in the Heat to the play-in tournament for the third straight year. Orlando won, so Miami is now 2 games back in the loss column of Orlando and Atlanta. Those two teams still play twice more. So there are scenarios where the Heat can catch up, force a multi-team tiebreaker of sorts, and I could start doing the hangover with the numbers and the poker and all that, and your eyes are going to roll in the back of your head if I explain it too much. But in multi-team tiebreakers, there's division winner, and all these teams are in the same division. There's record within division. There's head-to-head stuff. There's conference stuff. There are a lot of layers to it. We won't go into all of it now, but there are ways for the Heat to emerge first or second in a multi-team tiebreaker, which gets them into the 7-8 game, gives them a little bit more of a cushion to play in. But they're also tied with Chicago with 42 losses in the loss column. That game looms large in the coming week. Whoever wins that is going to have a major edge in terms of the 9-10. A lot to sort out in the standings. This is the nature of the play-in. We never really know until the final day of the season how exactly it's going to look. But, that's the fun of the end of the regular season. Until then, it was a great game, fun game. These are the kind of games that you don't get a ton of them towards the end of the season, but when two teams are really playing for something, you get an exciting one like this. Just didn't have the result at the end. But that's it for After the Buzzer. I'm Couper Moorhead. Thank you for joining me very much. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you very soon. Take care.